Hello, Bobby here for Torrins.com. This series of lessons is designed for absolute beginners, people that haven't even touched a guitar before, people that have just maybe purchased their first guitar, people that have no idea what they're doing, essentially. Okay, we're really going to start from square one in this next series of lessons, okay, for absolute beginners. So if you've already been playing for a little while or you're intermediate level or advanced, this is definitely not for you, okay? We're really starting at the ground floor here. We're going to go over the very rudiments of playing the guitar, okay? Just first of all, we're going to start off by talking about the guitar itself. We're going to talk about the strings. We're going to talk about the very basics of left hand and right hand position, getting the two hands to work together. We're going to start off by playing really simple melodies, and we're going to put, maybe some of these notes together to make, some recognizable tunes, and then after that, we're going to get into playing some really basic chords, get into some really basic rhythm. Again, this is just a beginner guitar method that we're getting into here. So again, if you're not an absolute beginner, then this lesson isn't for you. But if you are, stick around, and hopefully you'll learn something. All right, we're going to start off again by just talking about the instrument itself. This is a guitar. Okay, you knew that. We refer to the different parts of the instrument. Some of the main parts of the instrument correlate to parts of the human body, all right? And mainly I'm talking about head, neck, and body, okay? The head up here is also called the headstock, all right? That's like more of a fancy name for, but what we can refer to as the head, all right? And on the head, you see we have tuners, okay? We, turn these tuning machines to, raise or lower the pitch of the instrument, okay? That's how we tune the guitar. The strings make contact right here in this plastic piece, which is called a nut, okay? The nut is usually made of plastic. On fancy guitars, it's actually made of some type of bone. Ooh, all right? Anyway, this is the nut, okay? This piece of wood here on the neck, all right, is called the fingerboard, all right? This dark piece of wood that's under the strings, usually made of ebony or rosewood on most acoustic guitars like this. This is an acoustic guitar, by the way, a hollow guitar, not as opposed to a solid body electric guitar. And you can see these wires that go across. These are frets, fret wires, all right? We place our fingers on the strings. Those are strings. You probably knew that. We place our fingers on the strings behind the fret wires, and that allows us to get different pitches out of the strings. You see these dots that are on the surface of the fingerboard, or fretboard, fingerboard, fretboard, both of those terms are acceptable. These dots are actually fret markers. They help us to find our way around the neck. Most guitars also have fret markers along the top of the neck, so we can see them from this perspective, as well as being able to see them from the front. It allows us to find our way around the instrument. Most of the dots are at odd numbers, okay? Here on this guitar, we have fret markers at 5, 7, 9. This is 12. We'll get into that. I'll explain why there's a dot at 12 later on. 15 and 17. They're there for us to help us find our way around, because without the dots being there, well, everything kind of looks the same, and it's kind of hard to tell which fret is which. So those are fret markers. They're to help us find our way around. Now down here on the body, we have this other point of contact where the strings actually come out of the guitar. Okay, this entire piece right here is what we refer to as the bridge. Inside of the bridge, this piece right here, this other plastic piece where the strings are actually making contact, that's called the saddle. Again, saddles are usually on acoustic guitars made of bone or plastic, and the strings kind of sit in the saddle. Get it? All right. These pegs actually help to keep the strings inside of the bridge. Not all acoustic guitars have these. Some acoustic guitars are configured so where you can just put the string actually right through the bridge, and they'll come up over the saddle. But this is more of an old school acoustic guitar design where the pegs actually help to keep the strings wedged down inside of the guitar. All right. This is the pick guard. This is here to help protect the wood of the guitar from being scratched up by the pick. Okay, that kind of self-explanatory. The top of the guitar is this. Okay, we refer to this as the top. It actually looks more like the front, but it's referred to as the top. This particular guitar has a solid spruce top. Okay, spruce is a real common wood that's used on acoustic guitars. Another thing about this guitar that resembles an electric is how this part of the wood is kind of cut away. In fact, it's called a cutaway. The wood's cut away so your hand can actually get high up into the upper positions on the guitar to reach the upper frets. By the way, this particular instrument has 20 frets, 20 fret wires. Acoustic guitars vary. Sometimes they go from as few as like 17 or 18 all the way up to as many as 22. But this is a pretty common number of frets for an acoustic guitar, 20. That's pretty much just about all you need to know. This fancy design that goes around the sound hole, again, this is the sound hole, obvious. This design that goes around the sound hole is called a rosette. All right, most acoustic guitars have them, classical guitars have them. It's just strictly decorative. It's just there to kind of make the guitar look prettier. All right. So anyway, those are all the fundamental components of the guitar that you need to be aware of. Now, one real common question with beginners is, what's better to start on, an acoustic guitar or an electric guitar? Well, I think just having a guitar is good enough to start on, as long as you have something to play on. Now, acoustic guitars are more of a fundamental instrument. They've been around for a lot longer. You can obviously hear them without having an amplifier, so they're useful for that purpose. But electric guitars are actually physically easier to play, I think, in a lot of ways. Now, again, in a future lesson, we're going to talk about buying a guitar, certain things to look for when purchasing an instrument. Maybe we'll go into a little more detail about the difference between electric guitars and acoustic guitars in terms of their construction, their playability, and whatnot. But I think that electric guitars fundamentally are a little easier to play, but with acoustic guitar, they're, again, you don't really need the assistance of an amp to really hear them and just to get their true sound out of them. So I think that as long as you have a guitar that is relatively easy to play, meaning that the strings are relatively close to the fingerboard, so you don't have to work too hard, there's not a great distance to push the strings down. We call that action. As long as the guitar has a generally low action, I think that you'll be okay. And by the way, if you just acquired a guitar and it has old strings, then it's a really good idea to maybe take your guitar to your local music shop and have them put a new set of strings on. You can go really light too, okay? Strings come in different gauges, different thicknesses. The thicker strings tend to be a little more rigid, maybe a little more difficult to play, especially for a beginner. So I recommend putting on light strings, as light as possible if you're a complete beginner. Because another thing to consider is that the strings are going to, dig into your fingertips a little bit and cause a little bit of discomfort, all right? It's a little bit of discomfort. It's not that bad. But the lighter the strings, the less discomfort is going to be. So, if you have a guitar that has old strings, you can tell if the strings are old usually because they're visibly just old. They look dirty. They they may have certain markings on them that indicate that they've been played quite a bit. I recommend having a new set of strings put on your guitar. It'll sound a lot better too. So get a new set of strings put on as light as possible, and then you should be ready to go.